Welcome, church family, and welcome to those who are visiting us from near and far. What an amazing day to celebrate. What an amazing day to celebrate. And as I've had the privilege this year, I have probably been to more birthday parties than I have in my life. And this becomes a privilege as you become the mother of a young person who has a more active social life than you do. That's right. So, what you start to realize when you attend birthday parties is that it gets a little bit different, right? Different people celebrate birthdays differently. And sometimes you rock up to the birthday party and you can't find the birthday kid. Yep, it's in a play center, there's a birthday kid. Where's the birthday kid? Somewhere out there. Everyone just runs out and plays, and it doesn't really matter. Oh, you're not talking to me. I think Andy's trying to get your attention, little one. There we go. We've got kids' church. No, that's cool. That's cool. I was okay to say hello to her. So sometimes you can't find the birthday girl or the birthday boy. Sometimes you find them, but no one's interested in them, right? Like you walk up there, it's like there's 3 people sitting with the birthday girl, everyone else is just happy to eat the stuff, do the things. Sometimes you walk up and everyone's playing with the birthday person's presents. So you get exposed to a range of birthday parties, and what you realize is that depending on how you celebrate birthdays, we can kind of get caught up in a lot of different ways that we celebrate and miss the purpose of why we celebrate. So I don't want us to forget the reason we are here today. And today we talked, as we played this and as Demi prayed, we talked about the gift of hope. And I believe that that is one of the greatest gifts that the birth of Jesus Christ gave all of us. Peter describes it as this way. He says, we are born into a living hope. A living hope. A hope that cannot be shaken because it's not about a thing or a situation that will come. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist that was in the concentration camps, and he writes this book, and you're like, whoa, that's a bit of a dive, bear with me. He writes this book called Man's Search for Meaning. It's sold more than 200 million copies, I think. So, worth a read, right? But it also tells you that people are searching for answers. People are looking for meaning, right? People want to know why they're here and why the things around us are happening the way they're happening. So Viktor Frankl writes this, and in this he looks at people that lived through the experiences, and he said that there was one undeniable fact, that those who survived because they had a hope. They had a hope in something. Now, Chan Hellman is a professor at the University of Oklahoma. After going through over 2,000 published studies that identified hope as the key factor that predicts mental health well-being and physical health well-being, he starts this institute which he calls the Hope Institute, because he believes that hope is the single best predictor of a person's well-being and quality of life. But the problem was, what Viktor Frankl found was that as people had hope in various things, if that thing that they hoped in did not come to fruition, they would collapse. They would collapse. So what he found was people would hope that they would be released on a certain day, or hope that when they were released they would reunite with their families, only to come out and find out that they could not find their families, and they would simply destruct. Those who had survived such enormous pain and tragedy and had the hope to endure it and come through it would simply fall apart when that hope was taken away. So this is why it's so important that when we come today, we realize that you and I, our hope is not a thing that can be taken away. Our hope is not in a circumstance that may come. Our hope is not in a situation of improvement. Our hope is a living hope. It's the person of Jesus Christ. And so the definition is not like a wish. See, we use the word hope and wish interchangeably. I hope I have a good day today. You actually have very little control. You can control your attitude throughout the day, but you cannot control the events of the day to some extent. Hope is not a wish. It is not optimism. It is not, I hope next year will be better than this one. That is optimism. Hope is the knowledge, the certainty that the future will be better than the past. But not just that there is a power to get there. And so this is why the hope in Jesus Christ that Peter and Paul in Romans 8:24 talks about, for this hope we were saved. For this hope. Now hope that is seen is no hope. For those who have hope in what is seen. But what if we hope in what we have not seen? So today all of us are here because we have a hope. We have a hope that is not next year will be better than this year. And simply in that we have a hope that we know that for those of us who have this hope in Jesus Christ and believe that Jesus Christ, the celebration that we had, that Jesus Christ came to reconcile you and I back to Him, to reconcile what was broken within us, and to reconcile relationships. So the breaking of sin impacted us in multiple ways. And so if we take Jesus out of the equation, there is only so far we can go. Cato, who is a brilliant writer, uses this analogy. He says sometimes we are like, as we go through life and bad things happen to us, we carry this sack. And then people throw stones at us, or life throws stones at us, and we pick up those stones and we put them in our sack. You walk long enough, you're carrying this big burlap sack. Maybe some of you've been to a counselor or a psychologist. You take your sack down, pull out the stones, inspect them, look at them in various ways. Consider what may have caused the throwing of those stones. Consider the impact those throwing of stones may have made. And then at the end of the session, you put those stones back in your bag. Put that bag back on your shoulders and walk away. The problem is, broken people cannot have unbroken relationships. And so the legacy of that was not simply that we were not at peace with God. The legacy of that was we could not have peace with each other. So we will marry, but after a while, after the butterflies in our tummies are gone, we really despise the person we're with. We endure it. Maybe because of the stigma of marriage, of divorce. We cannot. We just live our own lives, find our own way of making merry. We have no joy in the person or what we have entered into. We have no joy in that. Because our hope in that situation was that we would find the person that would complete us. And Hallmark will tell you that. After extensive research that I continue to do. I know this. It will tell you that you will find the person that will patch all those wounds and take away all those stones. But I tell you today, that person is the person whose birth we celebrate today. There is no one else that can take away those stones, because what happens when you carry those stones around long enough is that you start throwing them at people. It's easier when you are hurting to see the problems with the world. It is easier when you are not at peace with yourself and peace with God to see what is wrong with everybody else. It is easier to live in that dysfunction and say this is as good as it gets when we have no hope. And so the last year has been intense, has it not? Yeah? Just one person? Yeah? I'm tired. When we got to December, I was like, thank goodness it's December. 2023, you have been almost right off. Intense. Intense here. Intense emotionally, intense physically. If you were in meltdown, yes. If you were in lockdown, which was Freudian slip, a bit of a meltdown. If you were in Melbourne, you had crazy lockdowns. If you were in Sydney, you had some lockdowns. But what you realized was, my goodness, it was intense. And we were tired coming out of it. And then you look around the world, and there is so much happening. There's stuff happening in the Middle East at the moment, and we're trying to look at it and going, where is this going? But see, the hope of reconciliation to God, within ourselves, and with people, is found in this gospel. And today, more than ever, this celebration is important, and knowing why we celebrate is important, because the world is looking for answers, and the answer is the hope in Jesus Christ. It is the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. So hope is the future will be better than where we are now, and knowing that we have the power to get there, right? So, in the Gospels, we have 2 records of Jesus' genealogies, right? For those of you who are theology geeks, you went, she said genealogy, this is going to be good. For those of you who find it extremely boring and skip over and he begot this one, you are terrified right now. We're not going to go into a detailed exposition into the genealogies, but I want you to think about, why 2 genealogies? Right? What you heard this morning was there were over 300 prophecies that were fulfilled in the birth, life, and death of Jesus Christ. Every detail was planned, prophesied, and came into fulfillment in this life. The probability of that occurring is impossible. It is impossible. We're not here because there is a fable that makes us happy. We're here because of the truth. The truth. So, in Matthew's account of the genealogies, Matthew documents the story from Joseph's end, right? So in Matthew's account of the genealogies, you will find, and he begot he, and he begot he, and he begot he. Some random things to note is that, generally when you recorded a person's ancestry, anyone tried to trace back your family tree? Yeah. Found any fun facts? Did you kind of go, not going to write that name there? It was a what? They did what? No. When you look through Matthew's account of Jesus' genealogy, through the line of Joseph, you get a few of those moments. She was what? What's even stranger is this. Women were not recorded when you recorded ancestry. Men were counted. In a time, in a day and age before feminism became cool, and you say to me, was feminism ever cool? Before it became cool, God saw it fit to reconcile women to their place in which He created them to be. Things of beauty, things of power. And so we have recorded in Joseph's lineage, we have people like Rahab. If you are looking to name your child, people tend to do this. You tend to go on Google. You tend to go biblical names. Google will spit out biblical names. Names without context are like scriptures without context. Don't go there. Find out who they are. Because last year, I bumped into a Rahab. And Rahab is beautiful. Her story is beautiful. But the problem was Rahab didn't know why she was named Rahab. Her parents hadn't told her that. And I had to tell her how beautiful her name was. But the start was a bit prickly, right? I mean, you're sitting there going, so, yeah. She's like, tell me about it. I was like, okay. So there's this lady. So do your research before you name your children and tell them about it so that we don't have those awkward moments. Okay? So you have names like Rahab, and you think, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And you have people like, and I love this, last year when all of the things happened with George Floyd, you saw the Black Lives Matter movement rise up, and you saw all of these people rise up, and I love that in the Bible, Moses married an Ethiopian. restoring people of color to equal value was God's idea? Like, and especially when we're sitting here and we're going, we need to find a way. God has a way. His way is Jesus. The gospel unites us across races. It unites us across ethnicities. It unites us across our mistakes. It unites us across our backgrounds. It unites us across our past. The gospel of Jesus Christ is the gospel of reconciliation. And so written in the story of the genealogies are lives that were simply reconciled. Reconciled because of the story of Jesus. So the story of the gospel, the one we celebrate, is a story of reconciliation. And now more than ever this is important. Because I really believe that we live in a season where we don't understand the glory of what God has created in community and the restoration that happens in community and in relationships. That even within families we have people who we endure. We endure them because we don't understand God's purpose in the process of reconciliation. If God could take the people He took to bring out the good news story, if Jesus' idea of 12 men that would change the world was a small business owner and a tax collector who would have probably scammed him, working closely together, I tell you what, there is no impossible relationship that you have in your family that He cannot reconcile and restore. Don't be content for the mediocre. Don't be content for space. Don't be content for what the world tells you when we have a hope. We have a living hope in the life of Jesus Christ. And so you have, can I have the first timeline? So you have the line of Joseph in the Gospel of Matthew, which starts from Abraham. And you have this one character. Now, there's lots of characters in between this. But just to make it easier, in the time that we have, we put this one guy. He's called Coniah, Jeconiah, Jehoiakim. He's got a few different names. But he was the bad dude. Like, he's the guy in the movie that from the start, that when he's introduced, you want him dead. Even if you are a peacekeeper, you just want him dead. And you actually don't mind how he dies. I surprised myself with that. We were watching Homeland a while ago. Some not very proud moments for me in that series. But I think the one that I was not proud of the most was how much I wanted this woman to die. Like, all through this series, I was just like, oh my goodness, she is just wreaking havoc here. When does she get her just desserts? And what is just enough other than wiping her out? And you're like, why did we come to this church again? You have those moments, you just don't talk about it. Let's just hope you're not sitting next to that person and they're on TV. So we have this guy, Jeconiah. Now, Jeconiah is so evil that there is a curse on his lineage. There's a curse in his lineage because he does so much evil that God says that no one from this line, there's a blood curse, no one from this line will sit on the throne. And we see that Nebuchadnezzar, who we learned about in the book of Daniel, comes into power after that, and Jeconiah's line does not get to sit on the throne. And then the lineage goes on, and then you see Joseph, right? So in Matthew's account, you see Jeconiah there. You know, because you know your Bible, that there was a curse. And you know that what the people that came after him, even good people like Zerubbabel, were governors, not kings, right? So you get that line, and then you have Joseph. Now in Luke's account, can we have the next slide, please? We have Mary's timeline, genealogy, recorded Jesus' genealogy through Mary's line. Now this is fairly unusual because you would generally, it traces through the father's line. So you have Mary's line, and it starts with Adam, but we've got Abraham here to kind of help you see that. And you have this, around this time, that something happens, right? Something happens around that time in Mary's line. Now what happens is in Numbers 27, you see that this guy, Zelophehad, I have to say that very carefully, all sorts of variations come out. Zelophehad had a bunch of daughters. Their names were, again, maybe a don't go list. Mahia, that's not bad. No, Mahala, Noah, nice. Hagla, Milcah, and Tirzah. So Zelophehad has these daughters, and then he passes away. Now there is no law for the inheritance to be passed on to daughters. The law was that the inheritance would go to the firstborn son. So here we are, and this gentleman has not had a son. There is no law in place, so we hear these daughters come to Moses and say, can we have our father's land? Can we have their inheritance? Can we have the right to be his heirs legally? In a time when women had no purpose other than basically breeding, and they kind of passed on between, generations for that purpose, here you have God speaking to Moses and saying, let it be so. Let it be so. And he says, what the daughters are saying is right. You most certainly will give them the property as an inheritance to their father's relatives and give their father's inheritance to him. And so you see here a restoration of women, of women's rights, of women's purpose. And something happens here, right? So why Mary's genealogy? So that through her line, Mary had no siblings. So she can be recorded there as the one who bears the heir, right? Not just through the male's line, but through the female's line as well, as the one who bears the heir. And you will say to me, okay, so God knew that Jeconiah was going to be evil, so he made this provision so that they would come together and that there would be restoration and reconciliation. That's what we're talking about, right? Restoration, reconciliation, when it came to the birthing of the son. Are you tracking with me? So that it would be okay. The father's line, the legal line was tainted, but it would be okay because the mother's line was now established. But here's the deal. Can we have the third slide? These are your two timelines put together. The story in Numbers happened way before the story of Jehoiakim. See, church, when you and I come to Jesus and we look at impossible situations and we sit there and we say, maybe there is provision for restoration and reconciliation with those relationships that I cannot see hope for. What you don't see is that the restoration came before the disaster. That the grace was provided, the provision was provided before the breaking away. That God is not a God that looks and is taken by surprise when the Middle East collapses, when your life collapses, when your marriage is going through hardship, when your relationships break down. And He is not a God that goes, now I must make provision. My Bible says, before the foundations of the world were laid, the Lamb of God was slain. The provision is before the breaking. Come on, church. This is the God we serve. So we have a hope that does not shake. Because we have a God that is not taken by surprise. The generations before, He has weaved in provision for what is it your situation is. What is the impossibility in your marriage that you've just decided, I'm just going to endure it? This person cannot be reconciled. What's the impossibility in your family? What's the relationship in your family that you go, I cannot, this will not. This will only work this way. What is it? See, the hope of reconciliation is the story of the gospel. And the reconciliation is provided before. It is provided before. Now, Carol, Chan Hellman, the director of the Hope Center, he says this interesting story. He says that when he got to a stage, he was homeless, right? So every day his purpose in life was to kind of get through it and live through it and have enough food, not to starve. And so when he got to the place where he had passed college, and all his hopes had been to just get through to college without being homeless and having food, he didn't know where to go. Bit like the people in Viktor Frankl's story, right? You get to the thing that you think solution to your problems, that marriage that will solve things, that relationship that will solve things, that breakthrough in that job that will solve things, that thing, that promotion that will solve things, these things that will solve things. You get there, and then you realize that sometimes it's not fixing the issue. It's still empty. And it can last for a little bit, but it doesn't last. And when you get there, what he says is he sat down and he felt so lost. He didn't know where to go. He had no hope. And he said, and at that moment someone walks up to him, puts his arm around him. It's one of his teachers. And he says, so what will you do from here? And how will you use this? And he says, and at that moment I had this realization that hope is not something I have as an individual. Hope is something we have as a community, because hope is social. So God calls you here because there will be days when your hope will wane and it will grow thin and you cannot see how God is working. But the hope that we have is that God is working. In fact, He started working even before you had the issue. He started working even before you realized it, even before you conceived. See, when we were little, my dad loved frankincense. If you don't know what frankincense is, raise your hand. Frankincense? Don't know what frankincense is? Fantastic. You're a lucky person. And if everyone else grew up with a father that liked frankincense? Okay, well, you can empathize with me. Frankincense was one of the gifts that the kings brought to Jesus, right? The kings, the wise men. The wise men brought to Jesus. Now, frankincense is made out of a sap in a tree. You kind of cut the tree, and don't let the analogy miss you here. You cut the tree till it bleeds sap, and then the sap hardens. And then that sap is used as a hard thing over coals, and it releases a beautiful aroma. Right? I grew up with a lot of frankincense. Every time we prayed, Dad will bring out his little... so we had to... we didn't have coals. We made coals by burning coconut shells. Anyone know how to do this? Yeah? Tutorials later. We burned coconut shells. We would, as the coconut shells became like coals, we would put frankincense in it. And then we would have our prayer time. Only I hated the smell of frankincense. And so I sat there thinking, gotta not breathe this much, as my sister slept. Because that's how she did family prayer and prayer time. We were little, she's saved now, it's good. So why frankincense? Because frankincense, something beautiful about scent is when Scripture talks about the worship of the saints, the community of worship, the worship of the saints, it says that it goes to Him like incense. Like incense. The one thing I've learned about scent, as I started investigating spikenard, because of the lady with the alabaster jar, and frankincense, is that scents have different tones. So if you had only a sweet scent, without any other tone, it would be sickly. To bring out a sweet scent, you have to introduce muskier, sometimes even bitter tones. And in the introduction of those things, it exemplifies, it brings out, it showcases the sweetness of the scent. If your worship, my worship, is like sweet incense to Him, then when Paul writes, for God uses all things to work together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose, Paul is talking about how your bitter tones, your dark tones, your undertones are necessary to enhance the sweetness of the good moments and the good worship. And all of this together is beautiful. And it is not so beautiful without the depth that it creates. I read the story about a bunch of, it was like a book club. So they would come, they would read something that had inspired them, and everyone would come and share, and people would applaud them. And so this guy, he was a well-known author, he comes up and he decides, I'm going to read the 23rd Psalm. And he starts reading, the Lord is my shepherd. And using all the skills he had learned as a public speaker, using all his skills he had learned as an academic, he elocuted that beautifully. He delivered it like a piece of art. And everyone applauded. They might have been appalled and struggling with words today. Everyone applauded. And he went and sat. And then as everyone had gone through the room, someone had to tap the shoulder of a little old lady who had fallen asleep while everyone elocuted. And so they tapped her on the shoulder. She had fallen asleep. She quickly shook herself up. And they said, would you like to share something? We're about to wrap up. And she hobbles with her cane to the top. And she starts with, the Lord is my shepherd. And when she had finished sharing, there was not a dry eye. And as the first speaker left, the person who facilitated the group said to him, why do you think people responded so differently to you and to her? And he said, I know the psalm. She knows the shepherd. Church, sometimes we can go through celebrations in life and church and sermons knowing, perfectly delivering, perfectly seeing, but not knowing. For the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us, so that we would behold His beauty. His beauty is in everything you see. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. When you receive Him, you will see Him in everything. In the dark tones, in the undertones, in the darkness, in the lows. In every part of your life, you will see God working, whether unclearly or clearly. You may not fully understand why, but you will see God. And you will see God in each other. See, for the man who has no God, it is easy to throw stones at the weakness that you see in your brother. For the man who sees God's image in him, you will look for beauty and start there. Because you know your shepherd, and he knows you. And this is not about something we teach you. This is about something you know in your heart. This is about something you know in your heart. I had this one more story. One more story before we finish? Okay. There was a pioneer, and as he was going through Indian territory, American Indian territory, to clarify, he saw coming across some American Indians, and they looked fierce, and you could see the billow of smoke gathering as they galloped, and he was scared. So they went behind the mountain, and then they hid. And so the leader of the pioneers said, I'm going to go and talk to the chief, because there is no way we can win this battle. We can't win it. There's too many of them. They outnumber us. So he went, and the troops from either side just watched. They just watched what's happening. They saw the two men, some drawing on the sand, some pointing, some gestures. And then the pioneer comes back, and the guy says, what's happening? And so he says, as we came to each other, we realized we could not understand each other. So I drew a circle in the dust with my finger to show that we were all one. In the land, he looked at the circle and drew a line through it, which of course meant that we are two nations. But then I pointed my finger to the sky to indicate we are all under one God. And that at that point, he reached into his pouch and took an onion. And he gave it to me. Naturally, I understood it to indicate that there were many layers to understanding and relationships. To show that I understood what he meant, I ate the onion. And I reached out to my coat and offered him an egg to show our goodwill. But he was too proud to accept my gift. He just turned and walked away. Meanwhile, the warriors on the other side are waiting for the Indian chief. Waiting for the signal to go to battle to annihilate those troops that they know they can take down quite easily. The Indian chief says, "Not today. When we stood face to face, we immediately knew we do not speak the same tongue. The man drew a circle in the dust. I know he meant we were surrounded. I drew a line through the circle to show him we would cut him and cover him in half. He then raised his finger to the sky to say that he could take us all out just by himself. I gave him an onion to tell him he would soon taste the bitter tears of defeat and death. But he ate the onion. And then he showed me an egg to show us how fragile our position is. Clearly, they have more troops coming. We must retreat." As you and I do life in church community, sometimes it can feel like that. You can walk away going, there is no way, this and that, and we're going to do this together. There is no way that this and that can create something beautiful. There is no way. But this is what Jesus says. Not because you and I are smart or good or perfect. Not because you and I are without fault. But because you and I love like Jesus loved. The world will know the good news. So this Christmas, as you go out and celebrate with your families, you have the opportunity to love like Jesus loved. You have the opportunity to live out the reconciling gospel of Jesus Christ, that God doesn't just reconcile God to man. He reconciles brokenness within ourselves, and then He reconciles us with each other, that even though we may have nothing in common, other than we are made in the image of God. And for that reason, you and I, we have the same worth. We have the same worth and value, that if you were the only person, He would have died for you. Same worth and same value. I want the worship team to come up. And I know I said we're going to sing Run to the Father, but we're not. You're not surprised. I love it. They do well. We're going to sing I Speak Jesus. Because I want you to know that your hope today is not a vain optimism. It's not a wish that your life will be better. It is not a wish that your marriage can get better. It is not a hope, a random thing. It is a certainty that the future can be better than the present, because there is a power of God within us to reconcile, to live lives that make no sense if not for the death, life, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that's why we celebrate this living hope. So we're going to sing I Speak Jesus, and I want you to know. And there's this part in this. I speak Jesus for my family. I speak His holy name. I want you to know that there is the power of the reconciling blood of Jesus Christ to restore marriages this morning, to restore families this morning, to restore, and this afternoon we're going to open our doors and we're going to have people come to restore relationships with people that we might have nothing in common with, except that they were made in the image of God, and God loves them. He loves them like He loves you. And we're going to pray and we're going to sing this song, knowing that the power of this gospel is available to you and I. It is not a good way. It is the good news. And it is the power of Jesus Christ. If you will close your eyes, if you know the words, can we dim the lights a little bit? Pastor Joe, I'm going to invite him to do communion. That's right, yes. At the end of this, but we're going to sing this song. And I want you, as we sing this song, to visualize. I want you to visualize. Because hope is what we need to see, right? We need to see it. If you want to rise to your feet, rise to your feet. If you want to sit down, sit down. But connect with the words that you are speaking. You're speaking Not a hope, a vain hope, but a living hope. In the power and the presence of the name of Jesus. For the restoration and the reconciliation of everything that seems impossible. For everything that seems impossible. The reconciliation that can only come through the power of this name. So let's speak this name.
I just want to speak the name of Jesus over every heart and every mind. 'Cause I know there is peace within your presence. I'll speak Jesus. I just want to speak the name of Jesus. Every dark addiction starts to break. Declaring there is hope and there is freedom. I'll speak Jesus. Let's declare it. Come on. Your name is power. Your name is healing. Your name is life. It breaks every stronghold, shines through the shadows, burns like a fire. I just want to speak the name of Jesus. Every dark addiction starts to break. Declaring there is hope and there is freedom. I'll speak Jesus. Oh, I just want to speak the name of Jesus. Over fear and all anxiety. Every soul held captive by depression, I'll speak Jesus. Your name is power. Your name is healing. Your name is life. It breaks every stronghold, shines through the shadows, burns like a fire. Your name is power. Your name is healing. Your name is life. It breaks every stronghold, shines through the shadows, burns like a fire.
Gonna declare it now, church.
To shout Jesus from the mountains, Jesus in the street,
Over every
Jesus in the darkness over every enemy. Jesus for my family, I speak the holy name, Jesus. Oh, we shout Jesus on the mountain, Jesus in the street, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy. Jesus for my family, I speak the holy name, Jesus. Oh, shout Jesus from the mountain, Jesus in the street, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy. Jesus for my family, I speak the holy name, Jesus. Come on, sing it out with all you got. We shout Jesus. We shout Jesus from the mountains, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy. Jesus
heard this word this morning, and your faith and your hope is not in Jesus Christ, before we go into a time of communion, I want to give you an opportunity to accept, to walk in this hope that Jesus Christ of Nazareth, born in Bethlehem, over 2,000 years ago, is not a fable, is not just a story. He's God who became man so that He could die for the things that you and I have done and will do, so that we can walk in relationship with Him and restore to us what was lost: sonship, communion with God. Emmanuel, God is with us. This morning I want to invite you, if that is you, will you make a decision? It's not a magical prayer, it's a decision. Like entering into marriage, you make a decision to enter into it, and then you walk in it. You are entering into it. If you want this hope, if you have lived life hopeless, or you placed your hope in things and they have disappointed you, then this morning I want to invite you to a hope that will never disappoint you. A hope that will never leave you. A hope that it can never be shaken. Will you accept the sacrifice and the resurrection power of Jesus Christ in your life this morning? And that's a decision you make in your heart. You just say, yes, Jesus, that's me. I want to do that. I want to live that. I want this hope. I want this power. I want to know that my suffering's not in vain. I want to know that the same God that orchestrated providence before a mistake is the same God that writes my story. That there was providence before my mistake. There is design in my life. I want to know that. If that is you, then make a decision this morning. Jesus, I am yours from this day forth. Not just salvation, but to your Lordship. To live, to know, and walk in obedience.